Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today, this third day of July, just prior to celebrating the 4th of July, and probably all my audience is going to see this a day or two or maybe even a week after the 4th of July. But as a person of substance as a person who's trying to see that the general public in our great nation, our state here, our world, is really informed about what things are going on, so-called undercurrent of what's really happening, and trying to reestablish a press where finance is not the driving force, and advertisers, that type of thing, or big corporations. Rather than this is a medium where the upper level, the middle level, the lower level can actually come to see some unique information. And today's program is part of a series that I want to examine some of the giants in our society, and I've kind of reversed my thought process here because of the state legislature and the 4th of July parades and politicians handing out their cards and that type of thing, and these parades and these social events that you as citizens need to contact those people now after the 4th of July and tell them we want you to look at Repke's examination of some of these giants, relating back to the family trees on the farm now that I believe truly have become subsidy forests, yet we need to examine to see if the Senate bill really addresses that factor. I don't think it does. Truly, it doesn't put a true support price in that our farmers need to be market strong today and in the future. Clearly, it doesn't do that. And when the House version of the Farm Bill comes along, we want some examination of these giants that the Mike Stamers, who is a big farmer in the Wilmer area. I think he's got branches in Morris and Osakis and southern Minnesota, whatever. That we take a look, not that Mike Stamer or Eugene Howard, the big landowner, or the Iowa corn farmer that blogs on AgWeb and the discussion groups, or Jerry Golke, the market advisor with the Golke Group, or Andy Biebel in his taxes, or the seed companies that have enjoyed just incredible price gains in their product, almost twice what the going rate of inflation is, and what has happened with fertilizer prices. I want to examine all these things, and in the case of fertilizer, we've got the big Cargills and those type of people that the price of fertilizers just went through the roof and is a major factor in driving food prices, yet the nitrogen fertilizer, which is based on natural gas, which is dirt cheap right now, clearly shows that if you'd examine these giants, that our farmers shouldn't be paying big prices for natural gas, and it shouldn't be a negative factor on food prices and ethanol prices and all those kind of things. But getting back to what is the State of the Union, this, I believe it's 236th birthday, as we all contemplate what is really happening. We've talked here in the fact that our banking system and our financial system in our government, our world, is in chaos, people. If you took the true principles of capitalism rather than printing money as fascists like we're doing right now, or what the Europeans are doing, just ignoring reality of the marketplace, we have to just shake our head. If we were sitting around the campfire, so to speak, with the people that are on Mount Rushmore, and you would mention what's going on to these people, or get their view on the economics of the United States of America, the economics of the world, those four great men would just shake their head. Where have you people devolved to after 236 years? And yet at the same time, when I talked about my fellow Donnelly workers here that truly need a union representation, negotiate with the management and ownership team of their employer, and needed throughout rural America and out the nation. Yet we must stay competitive, but simply to have a true profit sharing program so just the giants of our society don't take all the money. That we're in a situation here in Alexandria, and if it's here in Alexandria, like my old buddy Tip O'Neill talked, it's all over. And here's what I find this 236th anniversary of our democracy is that my Donnelly workers are afraid of their employer. They fear their employer. And they also fear that state government, the Attorney General of the United States, the President, will not protect them in any manner, shape, or form. And they got to be very careful what they do. And their viewpoints, some of the feedback on this 236th anniversary of our country is you can go to the Echo Press and read some of their stories of the company, I should say, where they have 4,000 some moles. Most of them are covered probably with a government patent, copyright, trademark. That if the workers say we have to have a couple $1 an hour wage increase, we have to have a true profit sharing program, that the management will just tell the owners of those moles, send them back to China, send them to Mexico, send them to Canada, send them to some other little molding shop plastic molding shop in the United States, and we'll break this union in principle in 90 days. In 90 days, these workers will come back crawling. We'll start them at $10 an hour, and then if they increase their productivity, we may get them back to the wage rate they were at, and we're surely not going to give them a look at the books or true profit exam. And I'm saying this, people, strictly with the feedback that I'm getting from my fellow workers on the 236th anniversary of our country, which just saddens me to no end. And it should sadden you, the people of substance that watch this program, whether you're Republican or Democrat. What has happened? How does 40% of the population live in fear and of their employer or of their financial system, whether they're even going to keep a house, whether they're going to be able to feed their kids? How can that be happening when all the media sources talk we're the richest nation on earth? Aren't we to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people? If these giants of our society, if they're not examined, how do we go forward? They're living in luxury. And this is why I bring these names up. When I look at Mike Stamer I have to look at an operation. It's a huge operation. I get feedback from a number of sources of what he's doing. Now, he's a big sugar beet grower, so he's benefited, he and his family, and the three families I talked about, benefited tremendously from the sugar policy that Chuck Canton and I sold to Tip O'Neill. And yet, what is that farm policy? There's no subsidies involved at all. It was just a sound support system to see that we would have good union jobs and we would have suppliers in our community that could make good money, that we could pay our employees a decent salary and be a real plus to the communities that were sugar producing communities. And yet at the same time, we need to examine an operation like Mike Stamer's to see that how much money has he received under Freedom to Farm? Unless we examine some individual audit people, we get no outrage from the public to see that the benefits, and I'm calling these guys giants in relation to Donnelly workers, giants in relationship to the common workforce in our society today. We need to look at how many $40,000 checks per year under Freedom Farm Mike has received. And in some cases, I think if he had 2 and 3 entities, like I think he managed for a while, he probably got more. And one $40,000 check is more than any of these common Donnelly workers I'm talking about. And the government gave it to him. And yet at the same time, recently, in the last year or two, the government gave him $50,000 to buy a corn dryer. A grant, $50,000. And if you call the people in the Wilmer area, Renville County, around the state that are aware of farming things, would they say Mike Stamer should have got $50,000 to buy a corn dryer? And then what about crop insurance subsidies? How much money have we given Mike in his quest for a large farm operation, subsidies to protect himself as well as the landlords, the seed companies that are overcharging, the fertilizer companies that are overcharging, some of his landlords that are overcharging? What are we doing with government money? Why are we paying 60% of the crop insurance subsidies? Yet it's an interesting thing. We have to ask, now, does the new Senate Farm Bill address these issues? Or if Mike continues to buy new machinery and more grain bins and manages taxes, he can keep under this new Senate guideline and still continue to grow his operation? And then what about if he's not taking the big subsidies? What if he's just taking the 50% insurance coverage, and which, at least under the 2008 Farm Bill, would have been only a few $1,000s, but an operation like his, I would say, but I wanted to examine, to be fair to Mike and the other large farmers in Minnesota and across the nation, would he still be insured, or how many millions of dollars of coverage under the 2008 Farm Bill did he buy for just a few $1,000s? And that's some of the things that I want you to think about, and ask your congressman, ask your senator. We have to examine these large farm operations because it'll show us more on this 236th anniversary about our country than anything, and we can all relate to it. Yet at the same time, let's look at Eugene Hauer of Shakopee, Minnesota, and see what government policy, part of the farm policy, is doing for him in the 1031 exchange type things, where was originally pushed on that, well, as the cities encroach on these poor family farms, we've got to help them to reestablish. And let's look at what Eugene Hauer of Shakopee has been able to do, and what is federal crop insurance really doing to see that on his new land ventures, helped tremendously by government policy, helped tremendously by tax policy. What's really going on there? And I think you'll find it fascinating if you look at how that whole program has devolved, I would say, and to make giants out of people that had a limited number of acres on the edge of the city, but now are true giants when you look at their operations. And the other thing, when we talk about farm policy, I think we have to look at the Iowa corn farmer. Now, there is the Iowa corn farmer. The Iowa corn farmer, you can go to agweb.com and go to discussion groups, and you can read his post. He has posted there where at one time he had 1,800 acres of paid for Iowa land, and now I think last I read he's got 2,000 acres of paid for Iowa land. And so when we do the giant examination, as far as acreage compared to a Mike Stamer, he's not that big. But easily that would make him worth 2,000 acres at $8,000, what, 16 million bucks? Should we as taxpayers be subsidizing the crop insurance for the Iowa corn farmer who is worth $16 million, that could rent that land out? And some of the things that is not being talked about, he also rents a little bit of land out. And he just doesn't rent it for cash rent. He takes 75% of the crop and gets some young guy, 75 or maybe it's even 80 now, and gets some young guy to do the work, gets all the government payments, or his wife or his kids or his corporations or whatever. And but it's not really a large farm. I think he probably still farms less than 3,000 acres. And why aren't we cornering the House and the Senate to say, what is this Iowa corn farmer, this giant amongst us that people wouldn't really view as a giant? They maybe wouldn't view Eugene Hauer of Shakopee as a giant, or even Mike Stamer as a giant. And what about Jerry Gulke, who has been advising people on markets? And then you can go to the Gulke group and look at his office at the Chicago Board of Trade circle there. And what, under these new farm bills, is Jerry's farmland, and if he's still farming, are we going to still subsidize his crop insurance premium by 60% because he only farms about 2,000 acres? Yet has mass wealth. Obviously, I'm sure he's probably off the direct payment deal, and Mike Stamer's maybe the same. But I think we have to have our government examine these people. When our fellow workers, 40% of the workforce in this country today, people, are living in fear of what? Their employer. They're in fear of the simple thing of, can I keep a roof over the head of my family, a car to drive to work to get the kids to school, and so on and so forth. This is why I'm bringing this up. That's why I'm demanding you, my audience, I believe people of substance, whether you're Republican or Democrat or hardcore middle moderate like myself, why aren't we doing this? And then we look at probably one of the premier accounting firms in the state of Minnesota, the Andy Biebel, who used to be Larson Allen, I think the mayor here in Alexandria, sold his accounting practice to this firm in their growth process, and now they got some other name in front, and I didn't get a chance to look at that. But we truly need to look at, examine for the common worker at Donnelly, for you, the common citizen, what these incredible tax breaks under this period of stimulus by government is done. And the one I think that I want you to demand of your congressman and your senator is what Biebel's group had, where they had a farmer that had $1 million worth of profit, but it was in a DTN letter. I probably got a copy of it in my piles of paper here in my office, that said that rather than paying $1 million worth of tax, at least that's what the letter implied to me, $1 million of tax, this farmer spent $1 million in grain storage and handling. People that will say, if it's $3 a bushel now, I'm not up on exactly what it is, but I'm sure for $3 a bushel you could build a pretty good facility. So at $3 a bushel, let's say he built 300,000 bushel of storage and handling equipment. This investment that he got scot-free will service he or his heirs for a minimum of 30 years, people. Just think of that. And rather than paying income tax after he probably received all these subsidies like these other names that I mentioned here, the guy's in a position where Should I pay income tax? Should I give Uncle Sam, who's drowning in debt, drowning in deficit, should I send him a check for $1 million, or should I just go down to the road to the local grain bin dealer, whether it's in Fargo or Mankato or Olivia or wherever, and I'm just going to sign a contract for 1 million bushel of storage. You got to have it up and going by the end of the year, and my family is pretty well set. And so I want that one examined. And yet at the same time, when we look at what's happening in seed, we always hear ethanol is the problem with food prices. And yet if you look at the price of seed and some of the other farm inputs, you just go, wow, how did two companies, Monsanto and DuPont, basically corner the market on corn and soybeans? We should be having our legislators examine this. And they did it with a unique profile of mapping the corn genotype, the soybean genotype, the gene splices. And they took it to federal court on a common citizen jury, and got those common people that really knew nothing about the seed industry or genetics, and saying, yeah, I see what they're telling us. We got to let the Pioneer Division of DuPont have an exclusive monopoly on what they've been doing with public developed hybrids and stuff, varieties over the years, and the same for Monsanto, which is their DeKalb, I think it's Asgrow as well yet. How did we let this happen? And do it in a context of what is the seed cost in other parts of the world that are suddenly competing with the American farmer, and especially soybeans. How does Brazil, Argentina, and the United States, how does their yield difference compare, members of the Senate and the House? Well, if you look at the numbers, the United States, Brazil, Argentina all raised about the same annual yield. Real close, with a reasonable deviation factor as they talk. Yet at the same time, the American farmer is always paid through the nose. In other words, we have funded, the American farmer here has funded, and you funded it by subsidizing these farmers over the years to pay for all this high price seed examination development. And yet Brazil for many years just pirated it, and the trade deals and whatever finally got Brazil to, they started paying some royalties, at least on soybean production, and now they're starting to up their corn yields that were always just way below ours, probably always will be. But when you examine Argentina, saw something in the news here just recently from one of the major newspaper or financial newspapers. We should examine Argentina, and I think they were prying on a negative basis. But on the case of an examination of these giants, you'll find out that the price of soybean seed that yields the same as seed here in the United States is only costs the farmer probably a third or a fourth of what it costs here. And why? Because they just ignore the fact that DuPont and Monsanto want everybody to buy new seed from them. They plant some of the seed that they raise themselves on their own farm. Yet the American farmer here, he can no longer raise seed that he grows on his own farm. Now, seed corn you can't because of hybridization, that type of thing, but soybeans you surely can. And so all these factors have to be looked at when we're talking sound policy. And you have to audit what's going on. In this political debate, we've talked about health care here, and all these factors. People, we have to see that government policies are like these forefathers on Mount Rushmore. That government can't just look out for these local giants here in Minnesota that people wouldn't even consider giants, but one of the upcoming programs I'm going to do on some real giants, and you're going to see how your elected officials really drop the ball on that, and your media officials, your media TV networks don't even want to cover it, don't even understand it. But if you come to Little Informed TV and listen to my broken English and that type of thing, I think you'll be astonished there, maybe even more than you are astonished here today, if we just examine some of these people that are in our midst. The other thing that I want to touch on is the fact of food policy and what we talk about as food products. Now, the interesting thing is oats. In our whole process of farm policy, a Freedom Farm, oats was subsidized just $1 per acre since 1996. Yet rice was subsidized by an average about $95 per acre. And peanut policy was bought out, and now it's become a contract crop. Yet our Congress and the provisions in the Senate bill are still looking at peanuts as a free market product. And the reality shows that peanuts, rice, and cotton should be governed under a similar policy to what we've had in sugar. And here's a thought process I want to give you to tell to your leaders. A few years ago, I was at the Freeman Institute at the University of Minnesota, the Democratic version of the University of Minnesota compared to the Republican version, the Carlson School of Business. And Pueblo was there. I call him Pueblo, from South America. We're paying $147 million a year to Brazil because we're exporting cotton. When in reality, people, we're not exporting cotton. We're just exporting our jobs for it to be run into fabric and into shirts and then brought back into this country. We're not the number one exporter of cotton, because exporting is truly something where you take what you don't need and sell it to a user in a foreign country. And that is one of the things I really want in this examination of giants brought out, is the cotton deal. How stupid have we been? And when I brought it up to the speaker, nobody even, when he talked about issues on the WTO, the WTO is a joke. Always had been. Idiots like Grassley followed it, but nobody of substance. And I talked to him in Minneapolis there, and I said, what about sugar policy compared to cotton policy? And he just smiled at me and he said, I just do not talk about that. Oh, excuse me, he said, you guys don't export sugar. You just protect your domestic producers. So you have a cheap, reasonable supply not affected by outside sources. And I said, sir, we do the same damn thing on cotton, and you know it. And he had a smile that big, and he said, yeah, but you got dummies running your government. And he walked away. And so from a standpoint, if we look at the three crops that the Senate and the House are telling us have to have special policy, yeah, they have to have special policy to protect domestic production, just like we've done in sugar here. But we certainly don't need to subsidize cotton, rice, and peanuts the way we have, or many of these other crops. People, it's time to end these subsidies for these giants, whether there are local giants or the giant corporations that handle the chicken business, that type of thing. People, here's what I'm trying to tell you on this 236th anniversary of this great country. People, we have lost our way, and Inform TV here is for one reason, to see that we all get back on track, whether Republican, Democrat, or Independent, a worker, or a small business, or a corporation. We've got to get our act together, and let's start this 4th of July. Thanks for listening to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke.